Rome, 73 BC. Beneath the marble and wealth of Livia Marcella's seaside villa lies a secret that could topple the Republic. When Titus Varro, a scarred gladiator with honor rarer than gold, discovers a forgotten vault filled with treasure and damning evidence against a powerful senator, he makes a choice that defies everything Rome taught him. Rather than flee with riches that could buy him a kingdom, he stands before his widowed employer with the truth in his calloused hands. The whispers of conspiracy grow louder as shadows move against the villa's walls. The patrician widow and the former slave find themselves bound by danger, secrets, and something neither dared name. Will they risk everything, status, safety, even life itself, to follow what stirs in their hearts? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the atrium of Villa Marcella as Livia adjusted the folds of her black stola. 5 years a widow, and still Rome expected her to wear the garments of mourning. She touched the simple silver brooch at her shoulder, the only ornament deemed appropriate for her station. At 35, she was neither young bride nor respected matron, but suspended in that precarious space between, where a woman of patrician blood without a husband became both pitied and prey. Domina, the steward from the Valerius estate, has arrived again. Helena's voice carried the weariness they both felt. He brings another offer. Livia smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her stola. Show him to the receiving room, and bring the property scrolls. Helena, Greek-born and silver-haired, had managed the household since before Livia's marriage. The older woman's eyes held a warning. This is the third visit this month. They grow persistent, as do the jackals when they smell weakness. Livia squared her shoulders. But they will find no easy meal here. The receiving room overlooked the sea, its windows open to catch the salt breeze. Below, waves crashed against the cliffs that supported the villa's western edge. This view alone was worth more than most men earned in a lifetime. One reason among many the neighboring estates coveted her land. The steward was a thin man with calculating eyes who bowed with practiced deference. Lady Marcella, my master sends his regards and hopes you have reconsidered his generous offer. 20,000 sesterces for an estate worth 5 times that amount is not generosity, but insult. Livia unrolled the property scroll across the marble table. Your master's concern for my welfare is noted, but unnecessary. A woman alone cannot manage such extensive holdings. His tone suggested he spoke an obvious truth. The damage to your east wing after the spring storms remains unrepaired. There have been thefts, rumors of vagrants using your grounds. Livia maintained her composure, though his words struck their target. The villa was suffering. Without a male relative willing to oversee the estate without trying to claim it, she struggled to hire workers who would respect her authority. My husband's investments continue to provide sufficient income, she said, the lie practiced and smooth. In truth, the funds were dwindling faster than anticipated. After the steward's departure, Livia walked the grounds with Helena, surveying the damage he had mentioned. The collapsed storage room in the east wing, garden walls crumbling in 3 places, a stable door hanging from one hinge. They watch us, Helena said quietly. Note every weakness. Last night, Quintus chased away 2 men near the olive press. Livia frowned. Quintus was their gardener 70 if a day. He shouldn't confront intruders alone. Who else is there? Helena's practical question hung in the air. Most of their male servants were either too old or too young to provide protection. That evening, alone in her study, Livia reviewed the household accounts by lamplight. The figures confirmed what she already knew. The estate hemorrhaged money. Repairs, taxes, and the constant bribes required to keep local officials from finding irregularities in her husband's will that might allow them to assign a male guardian to oversee her affairs. A knock interrupted her calculations. Helena entered carrying a cup of warmed wine. You should rest, Domina. Livia rubbed her temples. And wake to the same problems tomorrow? Helena set down the cup and closed the door. I have a suggestion, one you may find Unconventional. Livia raised an eyebrow. Helena rarely offered unsolicited advice. There is a man, a freed gladiator who has been doing work for merchant Petronius. He has been hiring himself out as a guard and laborer. They say he is educated, disciplined, and, most importantly, has no interest in Roman politics or social climbing. A gladiator? In my household? Livia couldn't hide her shock. The gossip alone would. The gossip already assumes the worst, Helena interrupted with unusual boldness. At least with protection, you might keep what is yours long enough to silence them. Livia stared at the neat columns of figures that told the story of her dwindling security. A former gladiator. A man who had killed for sport and survived. The thought should have repulsed her. Instead, she felt a flicker of hope. The first in many months. Arrange a meeting, she said finally. But discreetly, Helena. Very discreetly. That night, Livia stood at her bedroom window, watching moonlight silver the waves below. The sea had always represented freedom to her, vast, untamed, answering to no master. Yet here she stood, as trapped as any slave by the invisible chains of Roman propriety and law. Perhaps it was time to employ unconventional methods to protect what was hers. Tomorrow, she would meet a gladiator. Titus Varro wiped blood from his knuckles, the familiar sting a reminder of the life he had left behind. The merchant's warehouse stood secure now, its would-be thieves scattered into the night. 3 months free from the arena, and still he earned his bread through violence. Excellent work, as always. The merchant pressed a small pouch of coins into his palm, though perhaps you could have left one conscious enough to question. Titus pocketed the payment without comment. The rudis, the wooden sword granted upon his freedom, hung at his belt, a weight both symbolic and hollow. 10 years in the arena had earned him this freedom. Yet Rome had no place for a man who was neither slave nor citizen, neither barbarian nor Roman. He walked the darkened streets of Ostia toward the room he rented above a tannery. The smell of rotting hides and human waste hung heavy in the night air. Freedom, he had discovered, often stank. In his sparse quarters, Titus placed the wooden sword reverently on the table beside a small bronze statuette, the only possession he had carried from his homeland. A seated woman, face worn smooth by years of handling. His mother's goddess, though her name had faded from his memory along with his mother's face. He poured water over his split knuckles, watching pink rivulets run into the cracked basin. At 40, his body remained powerful, honed by years of training and combat. But each morning brought new aches, old wounds that spoke of rain before the clouds gathered. A knock at his door was unusual at this hour. Titus retrieved the knife hidden beneath his pallet before answering. A woman stood in the hallway, her gray hair and dignified bearing at odds with the squalid surroundings. "Are you Titus Varro?" she asked in Greek, her accent cultured. He nodded once, not lowering the knife. "I am Helena, steward to the Lady Livia Marcella. My mistress wishes to discuss a proposition of employment." Titus studied her. "I don't serve Romans." The older woman's mouth tightened. "Yet I see Roman coins in your purse and smell Roman wine on your breath." A fair point, made without fear despite his size and the blade in his hand. He respected that. "What does your mistress want? Protection? There are younger men better suited." "Younger, perhaps. Better suited? I think not." Helena's shrewd eyes assessed him. "We need more than a strong arm. We need discretion, intelligence, and someone with no connections to local politics." "I am a gladiator." "Was a gladiator," he corrected himself. "Not a bodyguard to patrician ladies. You were educated before you were a gladiator. You speak Greek and Latin with the accent of someone who studied with tutors, not in the streets." Her observation surprised him. Few noticed such things. "My mistress needs someone who can think as well as fight." Titus sheathed his knife but did not invite her in. "Why would a patrician widow hire a man like me? The gossip alone would damage her reputation. Her reputation matters less than her survival and the protection of what is hers." Helena's blunt response carried the weight of truth. "The villa is isolated. There have been thefts, vandalism, threats. Local authorities look the other way, hoping she will sell to someone who lines their pockets more generously. The story was familiar. Roman justice flowed with Roman coin. I'm not interested. He began to close the door. The pay is 20 denarii per month, plus room and board. His hand paused. The sum was generous, 3 times what he typically earned through irregular work. Consider it, at least, Helena said, producing a small wax tablet. This is the location. Come tomorrow if you wish to discuss terms. After she departed, Titus sat on his pallet, turning the tablet in his calloused hands. 20 denarii monthly would allow him to save, perhaps purchase a small plot of land eventually. Something of his own, away from Roman eyes. He had sworn never to serve Romans again after gaining his freedom. Yet what was freedom worth when spent in rooms that reeked of tannery waste, fighting for merchants who saw him as merely another weapon to wield? The next morning, Titus packed his few possessions: clothes, the rudis, his mother's statuette, and the knife he had carried since before his enslavement. The decision felt less like surrender than pragmatism. He would meet this patrician widow, assess the situation, and decide whether her coin was worth the compromise of his principles. The coastal road wound through hills dotted with olive trees and the occasional shepherd tending flocks. By midday, he crested a rise and caught his first glimpse of Villa Marcella, a sprawling structure of white stone perched dramatically on cliffs above the Tyrrhenian Sea. Even from a distance, he noted the crumbling sections of wall, the signs of neglect that Helena had mentioned. As he approached, Titus felt eyes upon him. Watchers in the olive groves, not the villa's guards, but men attempting to remain hidden. Interesting. The widow's problems appeared more serious than simple vandalism. He straightened his shoulders and continued toward the villa gates, the rudis at his belt a reminder of what he had endured and survived. Whatever awaited him inside those walls, he had faced worse in the arena and lived to tell the tale. Livia Marcella waited in the atrium, her composure maintained through years of practice at concealing her thoughts. When Helena announced the gladiator's arrival, she steeled herself for the type of man she expected: brutish, scarred, perhaps boastful of his arena exploits. The man who entered moved with unexpected grace for his size. Tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped dark hair graying at the temples. His face bore the expected scars: a jagged line across his left cheek, another disappearing beneath his simple tunic at the collarbone. But his eyes surprised her, deep-set, observant, and unmistakably intelligent. Lady Marcella. He inclined his head, the gesture neither servile nor disrespectful. I am Titus Varro. Thank you for coming, Varro. She gestured to a seat across from her own, noting how he scanned the room before sitting. Exits, potential weapons, sightlines all assessed in moments. Helena has explained our situation? Some of it. His Latin was cultured. Another surprise. Your property suffers damage and theft. You seek protection. The situation is more complex. Livia nodded to Helena, who placed a ring of keys on the table between them before departing. I need someone who can oversee security for the entire estate. Someone who can train my household staff to be more vigilant. Someone who notices details. Like the men watching your villa from the olive groves? He raised an eyebrow. Or the broken section of garden wall that would allow easy access from the north? Livia concealed her surprise. You've been here less than an hour. Observation kept me alive in the arena. He shrugged. Why me? Surely a retired legionary would be more appropriate. The question's implication was clear. A widow hiring a gladiator invited speculation. Legionaries have connections to Rome, political loyalties, gossip travels. She met his gaze directly. I need someone with no stake in Roman politics. Someone who values discretion and has no master but himself. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed his face. And what would my duties entail, exactly? Security, overseeing repairs to vulnerable areas, training the household in basic defense. She paused, and accompanying me when I travel to town. My position is precarious without male escort. You're forthright, at least. He studied her with those assessing eyes. 20 denarii monthly is generous for such work. I value my safety and independence. She rose, indicating the conversation was shifting. Allow Helena to show you the grounds. Meet the household. Then decide if you wish to accept. As they walked the villa's perimeter, Helena explained. The household structure. Quintus, the elderly gardener who had once served in the legions. Marcus, the 14-year-old stable boy who worshipped gladiators and would undoubtedly pester Titus with questions. For household slaves who maintained the villa's interior. 2 field hands who tended the olive groves and small vineyard. Not many for an estate this size, Titus observed. We've had to reduce staff, Helena admitted, unlocking a heavy door with one of her many keys. This will be your quarters, should you accept. The room was simple but comfortable, with a window overlooking the sea. Proper bed, not a slave's pallet. A chest for possessions. A small table and stool. The Lady Marcella treats her people well, Helena said, watching him assess the space. Free or slave, we eat well and sleep in decent quarters. She asks only loyalty and honest work in return. That evening, Titus joined the household for the evening meal, another indication of Livia's unusual management style. At most Roman estates, he would have eaten separately from the family, regardless of his free status. The dining room's central table was set with simple but quality dishes. Livia reclined at the head while others sat on cushioned benches. Titus found himself positioned at her right, a place of honor that clearly surprised the other household members. Young Marcus stared openly at him throughout the meal, curiosity battling with awe. Quintus watched with the wary assessment of a former soldier. The house slaves moved efficiently under Helena's direction, her ring of keys jingling softly at her belt as she supervised. Have you decided, Varro? Livia asked as the meal concluded. He considered the question carefully. The villa's vulnerabilities were numerous but fixable. The household, though small, seemed loyal to their mistress. And there was something in Livia Marcella's direct gaze that spoke of integrity, rare enough in Rome to be noteworthy. I accept your offer, he said finally, with one condition. Her eyebrow arched slightly. Which is? I work for you, not Rome. If your interests and Rome's diverge, I follow your orders alone. A subtle smile curved her lips. I believe we understand each other perfectly, Varro. That night, from his new quarters, Titus watched moonlight on the dark sea. For the first time since gaining his freedom, he felt something like purpose. This villa, this precarious widow with her intelligent eyes, needed protection. And he had always been a protector, even before Rome made him a killer. 3 weeks passed swiftly as Titus transformed the villa's security. Garden walls were repaired, locks strengthened, and routines established for checking the grounds at regular intervals. He trained Marcus and Quintus in basic watchman duties, teaching them to recognize signs of intrusion. Even the house slaves participated, learning to notice when items were disturbed or unfamiliar faces appeared near the property. Livia observed these changes with quiet approval, often joining Titus on his evening inspection of the grounds. Their conversations during these walks revealed a woman of considerable education and insight, someone who understood poetry and philosophy as well as the practical matters of managing an estate. He found himself looking forward to these moments, though he was careful to maintain the proper distance between employer and servant. Spring storms were common along the coast, but the one that arrived that night brought unusual ferocity. Wind howled across the cliffs, driving rain against the villa's walls with such force that it found every weakness in the aging structure. Titus was checking the stables when he heard the crash from the eastern wing. He ran through the downpour to find a section of roof had partially collapsed into an old storeroom. Water poured through the opening, soaking the clay amphory and wooden crates stored within. Marcus! Quintus! He shouted over the storm's roar. The boy appeared first, eyes wide with alarm. Fetch rope and timber. Quickly! Livia arrived moments later, a cloak pulled hastily over her sleeping tunic. How bad? Bad enough, Titus replied, already moving debris. But fixable. They worked through the night, salvaging what stores they could and bracing the damaged section to prevent further collapse. By dawn, exhausted and soaked, they had managed to secure a temporary covering over the breach. The eastern wing has always been troublesome, Livia said, accepting a cup of warmed wine from Helena as they surveyed their night's work. "It's the oldest part of the villa, built by my husband's grandfather." Titus nodded, studying the damaged wall thoughtfully. "The masonry is different here. Older style." "We should rest," she suggested. "Proper repairs can begin when the storm passes." But after the household retired, Titus returned to the storeroom alone. Something about the collapse bothered him. The break had exposed an inner section of wall built in a distinctly different style, larger stones, tighter fitting, without the cement typical of more recent Roman construction. He ran his hand along the exposed section, feeling the smooth-cut stone beneath his fingertips. This was old work, predating even the grandfather's construction. Perhaps Etruscan, from the time before Rome claimed these lands. Moving carefully, he removed additional debris until more of the ancient wall was visible. The newer wall had been built directly against it, unusual in Roman construction, which typically demolished older structures completely before building anew. A faint draft caught his attention. Air movement where there should be none. He pressed his hand against different sections of the older wall, feeling carefully. There, a slight difference in temperature between stones. He traced the edges, finding an almost imperceptible seam running vertically, then horizontally. A section approximately the height and width of a man, sealed within the newer wall. Titus sat back on his heels, considering. A sealed doorway? A niche? Whatever it was, someone had gone to considerable trouble to conceal it behind a newer wall. He debated whether to inform Livia immediately but decided against waking her. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Instead, he continued carefully removing debris until the ancient stonework was fully exposed. The seam definitely outlined what appeared to be a doorway, though no handle or obvious mechanism for opening was visible. As dawn approached, Titus heard movement in the villa. Rather than being discovered alone in the storeroom, he decided to withdraw until he could speak privately with Livia. Whatever secret the wall contained had waited decades, perhaps centuries. It could wait a few more hours. He covered his work with salvaged amphorae and returned to his quarters to change out of his mud-stained tunic. The discovery nagged at him as he washed away the night's grime. Old walls, hidden. Doors, such things often concealed either treasures or dangers, sometimes both. When the household gathered for the morning meal, he noticed the dark circles beneath Livia's eyes. The night's emergency had clearly exhausted her. His news could wait until she had rested. "The damage is significant but reparable," he reported instead. "With your permission, I'll organize the necessary materials and labor." She nodded gratefully. "Whatever you think best, Varro. I trust your judgment." Those simple words, "I trust your judgment," settled on him with unexpected weight. Trust was a commodity rarer than gold in his experience. It occurred to him that whatever lay behind that wall might change things between them, for better or worse. After breakfast, as the household dispersed to their duties, Titus returned to the damaged storeroom. He sealed the door behind him and moved the amphorae aside, revealing once more the ancient stonework with its mysterious seam. Time to discover what secrets this villa had kept hidden for generations. Titus worked methodically, tracing the seams of the hidden door with his fingertips. No obvious mechanism presented itself, no protruding stone to press, no convenient handle. The ancients had been clever in their concealment. He sat back, considering the problem. In the arena, impatience meant death. The same principle applied here. Rushing would likely damage whatever mechanism kept the door sealed. His mind traveled back to his time in the Ludus, the gladiatorial training school. His cellmate had been a Carthaginian called Nazur, a master thief before his capture and enslavement. During the long nights before matches, Nazur had described the locks and mechanisms he had encountered, demonstrating with bits of wood and straw how pins and tumblers worked. Even the most complex lock has a pattern, Nazur had told him. Find the pattern, and you find your way through. Titus examined the seams again, this time looking not for an obvious trigger but for irregularities in the stonework itself. There, a small depression at chest height, almost imperceptible unless one knew to look for it. He pressed gently. Nothing happened. He tried applying more pressure, then less. Still nothing. Perhaps it wasn't a pressure point at all, but something else. He ran his finger around the depression and felt a slight roughness at its center. Retrieving a thin knife from his belt, he inserted its tip into the depression. A faint click rewarded him, but the door remained sealed. Not the entire mechanism, then, but part of it. Methodically, he searched for additional depressions, finding 2 more, one near the floor, another at shoulder height. Each responded to the knife with a soft click. Still, the door remained immobile. The afternoon waned as Titus continued his investigation. He had sent word through Marcus that he was examining the storm damage and would report by evening, buying himself time. As shadows lengthened, he finally identified what appeared to be the complete sequence. 4 depression points that needed to be triggered in a specific order. The mechanism was ingenious for its time, far more sophisticated than he had expected from a structure this old. With each correct click, he felt a shift in the stonework, subtle vibrations as ancient tumblers moved within the wall. After the 4th click, a deeper sound emanated from within the stone, the final lock disengaging. Titus applied gentle pressure to the center of the door. It resisted momentarily, then yielded with a groan of stone against stone. Stale air rushed past him as the hidden chamber opened for the first time in generations. The space beyond was dark, and he hesitated before retrieving the oil lamp he had brought. Whatever lay inside had remained undisturbed for decades, perhaps centuries. He would be the first to lay eyes upon it in living memory. The lamp's glow revealed a small chamber, perhaps 10 feet square, its walls lined with stone shelves. And on those shelves, Titus inhaled sharply. Gold gleamed in the lamplight. Coins, ornaments, jewelry arranged in neat rows. Amphories stood in one corner, their seals intact. Scrolls and tablets were stacked on another shelf, the writing visible on some still legible despite their age. A fortune lay before him, more wealth than he had ever seen, even in the homes of the richest patrons who had sponsored his matches. With what rested in this room, he could buy land, a home, perhaps even purchase citizenship. He could leave Rome entirely, return to his homeland, or find a new place where his past would not follow him. The temptation twisted in his gut like a living thing. He stepped further into the chamber, lifting a heavy gold bracelet. Etruscan craftsmanship, by the look of it. He turned it in the lamplight, watching fire dance across the intricate metalwork. What would happen to Livia if he took this treasure and disappeared? The question arose unbidden in his mind. Without protection, how long before her neighbors or predatory relatives forced her to sell the villa? How long before she lost everything her family had built? He replaced the bracelet carefully on the shelf. The treasure had waited patiently for whoever would claim it. Perhaps it could wait a little longer. Decision made, Titus conducted a quick inventory of the chamber's contents. Beyond the obvious valuables, he noted items of historical significance, ceremonial objects, documents with official-looking seals, a small chest containing what appeared to be personal correspondence. He would need to show this to Livia, not just because the treasure rightfully belonged to her as the villa's owner, but because he suspected the documents might hold information vital to understanding why such wealth had been concealed. Reluctantly, he backed out of the chamber and carefully resealed the door, memorizing the sequence needed to open it again. The ancient mechanism worked as smoothly from the outside as it had from within. By the time he left the storeroom, night had fallen. The household would be gathering for the evening meal, and his absence would soon be noted. Tomorrow morning, he would speak privately with Livia. Tonight, he would guard the secret of what lay behind the ancient wall. As he walked toward the dining room, Titus realized his hands were trembling slightly, not from fear or even excitement, but from the magnitude of the choice he had just made. For a man who had owned nothing but his skill with weapons for most of his life, walking away from such wealth was perhaps the most defining decision he had ever made. Yet somehow, it felt right. For the first time since gaining his freedom, he had chosen his own path rather than simply surviving the one thrust upon him. Dawn had barely broken when Titus requested a private audience with Livia. They met in her study, a room lined with scrolls and wax tablets, evidence of her uncommon education. "You look troubled, Varro," she observed, gesturing for him to sit. "Is it the storm damage? I've found something you should see." His direct approach seemed to surprise her. In the damaged storeroom, something hidden behind the older wall. Her expression shifted from curiosity to wariness. What exactly? It would be better to show you. They walked to the storeroom in silence, Titus acutely aware of her uncertainty. At the concealed door, he demonstrated the opening mechanism, explaining how he had discovered it. When the stone finally swung open, he stepped aside, allowing her the first glimpse into the chamber beyond. Livia's sharp intake of breath echoed in the small space. She moved forward slowly, the lamp she carried illuminating gold coins, silver plates, jeweled ornaments. Her free hand rose to her throat, fingers closing around her husband's seal ring, which she wore on a chain beneath her clothing. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This villa has been in my husband's family for 3 generations. How could they not know? The mechanism is sophisticated and deliberately hidden." Titus gestured to the shelves. "But the treasure may be less important than these." He carefully lifted a bundle of scrolls, their casings marked with official seals. Documents. Livia set her lamp on a stone shelf, reaching for the scrolls with the reverence of someone who valued knowledge. Some of these seals, this is from the Senate Treasury, and this one bears the mark of Consul Gaius Cassius. She unrolled one scroll carefully, eyes moving rapidly across the text. Her face paled. "These are financial records, transactions between my husband's family and—" She looked up, shock evident in her eyes. Senator Cassius Nero. The name hung in the air between them. Senator Nero was among Rome's most powerful men, known for his wealth, influence, and ruthless political maneuvering. "Your husband dealt with Nero?" Titus asked carefully. "No. These records are old, from when my father-in-law was alive." She continued reading, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "These aren't legitimate business transactions. They're bribes, payments for political favors, tax exemptions, legal judgments." She set the scroll down and reached for another, this one bearing her late husband's personal seal. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the wax and unrolled the parchment. "Marcus knew," she whispered after reading. "My husband discovered these records shortly before his death. This is his private journal." Her voice cracked slightly. He was preparing to bring evidence of corruption to the Senate when he died in the riding accident. Titus watched her carefully. "You believe the accident wasn't accidental. It wasn't a question, and she didn't treat it as one. Instead, she reached for another document, this one newer than the rest. This is dated 3 months before Marcus died. A land acquisition proposal from Senator Nero, offering to purchase coastal properties, including this villa." Her eyes met Titus's. "The same offer his agents have been pressing on me since becoming a widow." Understanding dawned. "He wants the evidence destroyed. He doesn't know it exists," Livia corrected. "If he did, I would not have survived this long. He simply wants the land, perhaps to ensure no one ever finds what's hidden here." She moved to another section of the chamber, examining a small chest inlaid with mother-of-pearl. It opened easily to reveal personal correspondence, letters between her husband and trusted allies. "Marcus was building a case against Nero," she said after reading several. "He had allies in the Senate, men who suspected corruption but needed proof." Her fingers tightened on the parchment. "Proof that's been sitting in this room while I've been fighting merely to keep my home." Titus observed her reaction with growing respect. Where many would have focused solely on the gold and jewels, her attention remained fixed on the documents, on truth and justice rather than wealth. "What will you do?" he asked finally. Livia straightened, something hardening in her expression. "First, we secure this chamber. No one else must know of its existence yet, not even Helena." She touched her husband's seal ring again. "Then we continue Marcus's work. These documents must be organized. Understood? We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." "We?" Titus raised an eyebrow. Her gaze was steady, measuring. "You found this treasure and brought it to me instead of disappearing with enough wealth to live like a king. Either you are the most honorable man in Rome, or you have ulterior motives I haven't yet discerned." "The former is unlikely in Rome," he said with a wry smile. "But I gave you my word when I accepted employment. Your interests are mine." "Then help me understand what my husband died for," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "Help me finish what he started." As they carefully resealed the chamber, Titus realized they had crossed a threshold. No longer merely employer and protector, they were now conspirators, bound by dangerous knowledge that could either bring justice or destroy them both. For 3 days, Livia and Titus worked in secret, entering the hidden chamber during the quiet afternoon hours when the household rested. They established a system. Titus would stand guard while Livia examined the documents, her educated eye better suited to deciphering the legal and financial records. Nero's scheme is breathtaking in its ambition, Livia explained on the third afternoon, arranging several scrolls in chronological order. He's been systematically acquiring coastal properties from Ostia to Neapolis. For what purpose? Titus asked, keeping his voice low though they were alone. Control of shipping. She indicated passages in different documents. These properties provide natural harbors, defensible positions overlooking key trade routes. By controlling them, he controls who trades along the coast. Titus considered this. That alone isn't illegal. Ambitious, but not corrupt. No, she agreed. But this is. She unrolled a scroll bearing an official treasury seal. Tax records showing Nero's ships entering Italian ports without paying proper duties. And this? She produced another document. Judgments against merchant competitors who mysteriously lost their cases when challenging Nero's shipping monopoly. Titus examined a different document. A letter written in a hasty hand. Your husband had allies? Some. Cautious ones. Livia's expression darkened. Marcus approached Senator Marcus Aurelius Scaeva, an old friend of my father's. Scaeva was sympathetic but warned that Nero had supporters throughout the Senate. Without overwhelming evidence, any accusation would be political suicide. And then your husband died before he could compile that evidence. Titus's statement hung between them. 3 weeks after meeting with Scaeva. She nodded. Grimly. A riding accident on a horse he'd owned for years, on a path he'd traveled hundreds of times. Their work continued into the evening, when a commotion in the atrium interrupted their study. Quickly securing the hidden chamber, they emerged to find Helena confronting a visitor, Livia's brother-in-law, Publius. Sister, Publius exclaimed, his expansive gesture not quite hiding his scrutiny of Titus. I came to check on you after hearing about the storm damage. Livia composed herself quickly. Publius, an unexpected pleasure. Who is your guest? Publius's gaze flickered over Titus's scarred face and powerful build. Titus Varro, my new head of security. Publius raised an eyebrow. Security? Has there been trouble? Minor thefts. Storm damage. Nothing serious. Livia replied smoothly. Varro has military experience. The lie came easily, Titus noted. Acknowledging his gladiatorial past would only fuel gossip. Well, Publius smiled thinly. I'm relieved to find you well protected, though I wonder what Marcus would think of such an unconventional arrangement. Titus watched Livia's hand move instinctively to the ring beneath her stola. I believe my husband would approve of practical measures to secure his home and legacy. Publius stayed for dinner, his questions probing the villa's finances, repairs, and Titus's background. Though Livia deflected masterfully, Titus sensed purpose behind the inquiry. Publius wasn't merely a concerned relative. After the brother-in-law departed, Livia and Titus returned to the study. He's connected to Nero, Livia said without preamble. I've suspected for months. Publius's gambling debts are legendary, yet he maintains an expensive home in Rome. You think Nero pays him to pressure you to sell? I think Nero owns him entirely. She retrieved a document from her desk, not from the hidden chamber. This arrived 3 days ago. Another offer for the villa, higher than before but still well below its value. Titus examined the document. The timing is concerning. Days after we discover the evidence. You suspect a spy among the household? Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened on the edge of her desk. We should consider the possibility. He thought of young Marcus's hero worship, Helena's unwavering loyalty, old Quintus's quiet vigilance. Though it's equally possible Publius simply heard about the storm damage and saw an opportunity to pressure you when you're vulnerable. A knock interrupted them. Helena entered with a message tablet. From the praetor's office in town, she explained. A courier just delivered it. Livia broke the seal, her expression growing troubled as she read. We're summoned to court in 3 days. The neighboring estate claims our boundary marker was moved during recent renovations, encroaching on their land. Nero's strategy becomes clearer, Titus observed after Helena departed. Legal harassment. Drain your resources with court appearances and false claims, while his agents search for the evidence, Livia agreed. He suspects something exists but doesn't know what or where. Titus moved to the window, scanning the darkened grounds. We should move the most damning evidence to a secondary location, and I need to identify the spy in your household. If there is one. Livia joined him at the window, her shoulder nearly touching his. We could be imagining threats where none exist. In the arena, imagining threats kept me alive, he replied quietly. The men who died were those who failed to recognize danger until too late. She turned to face him, closer than propriety allowed. Then we'll imagine threats together, Varro, and prepare accordingly. In the moonlight filtering through the window, her determination matched his own. A patrician widow and a former gladiator, unlikely allies against one of Rome's most powerful men. Dawn found Titus and Livia in the villa's garden, a secluded space enclosed by high walls where herbs and flowers grew in neat beds. The early hour ensured privacy. Even Helena wouldn't appear until the household began stirring. Your stance is too rigid, Titus instructed, adjusting Livia's position. Balance is key. If you cannot move quickly, you cannot defend yourself. Livia followed his guidance, adjusting her feet as demonstrated. I never imagined learning combat from a gladiator in my mother's herb garden. The training had been her idea, practical knowledge should something happen to Titus. Initially reluctant to teach a patrician woman such skills, he had relented after recognizing the wisdom in her request. Again, he directed, moving to face her. Block my advance. Remember, you don't need strength, only proper leverage. She executed the defensive movement with surprising grace, redirecting his slow advance as taught. Her concentration was absolute, her determination evident in every precise motion. Better, he acknowledged. Now, if someone grasps your arm. His hand closed gently around her wrist. Their eyes met as she performed the escape maneuver, twisting away from his grip. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment. Recognition of changing boundaries, of trust building where none should exist between their stations. You learn quickly, he observed, stepping back to a respectable distance. Necessity is a demanding teacher. She massaged her wrist, not from pain but thoughtfulness. My husband believed women's minds were equal to men's. He taught me to manage the estate, to read contracts, to understand politics. He would approve of this education as well. He sounds unusual for a Roman patrician. He was. Sadness flickered across her features, which makes his absence all the more difficult. They continued training until the sun rose fully above the garden walls. As they concluded, Livia gestured to a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. Rest a moment. There's something I've wanted to ask you. They sat, maintaining proper distance, though the morning's activities had already broken countless social taboos. You're educated, she stated directly. Your Latin and Greek are cultured. You understand poetry when I reference it. You read complex documents with ease. How does a Thracian slave acquire such knowledge? The question might have seemed intrusive from another, but her genuine interest deserved honesty. My first master's son, Titus explained. Lucius. He was scholarly, sickly. His father purchased me as his companion when we were both 12. I was to protect him, but Lucius wanted conversation more than protection. He taught me what he learned from his tutors. You were friends, she observed, until his father caught him teaching me philosophy instead of fighting techniques. The memory remained sharp despite the years. I was sold to the ludus the next day. Lucius protested, but his father believed I had corrupted his son with foreign insolence by accepting such education. And Lucius died of fever 3 years later. I heard while training for my first arena match. Titus rarely spoke of this, yet found himself continuing. He left instructions that if I survived 10 years in the arena, funds would be provided for my freedom. His final act of friendship. Livia was silent for a moment. So you fought for a decade knowing freedom waited? It gave purpose to survival, he acknowledged. Many gladiators fight only until death takes them. I fought to live beyond the arena. And after gaining freedom? What purpose guides you now? The question struck deeper than she likely intended. Before discovering the hidden chamber, he might have struggled to answer. Now, purpose seemed clearer. Justice, perhaps, he said finally, or preventing powerful men from destroying those who cannot defend themselves. Her gaze was searching, measuring. The gladiator with a philosopher's heart. No wonder Rome never knew what to make of you. And you? He asked. What drives the widow who challenges senators and learns combat in secret gardens? Legacy, she answered without hesitation. Not just preserving what my husband built, but finishing what he started. Creating something meaningful from his death. The household was stirring now. Voices drifted from the kitchen, the stable, the servants' quarters. Their private moment would soon end. We should prepare for the court appearance, Livia said, rising from the bench. I'll need to review the property boundaries and original land grants. As they walked toward the villa, their hands brushed accidentally. Neither acknowledged the contact, yet neither moved away. Varro, she said as they reached the atrium. Should the worst happen, should Nero's agents find the evidence or force me from the villa, promise me one thing. Name it. Take the documents to Senator Schiva. Ensure my husband's work wasn't in vain. The request revealed her practical nature. She planned for all contingencies, even her own defeat. I promise, he said, though I intend to ensure such measures aren't necessary. Her smile held warmth he hadn't seen directed at him before. For a man who survived the arena, I imagine few challenges seem insurmountable. Not insurmountable, he corrected, merely requiring proper strategy and sufficient determination. As they parted, she to her study, he to inspect the grounds, Titus recognized that something fundamental had shifted between them. No longer simply employer and protector, they had become allies, confidants, and perhaps something more dangerous for them both. The day before their court appearance, Titus found fresh footprints beneath the window of Livia's study. The distinct imprint of hobnailed boots, military style, suggested more than common thieves. He traced the trail to the garden wall, where a cypress tree had been used to enter and exit the grounds. They're growing bolder, he told Livia as she examined the evidence. Or more desperate. Did they enter the villa? She asked, maintaining remarkable composure. No, the shutters held. He indicated scratches on the wood, but they tried. That afternoon, Titus gathered the household staff in the atrium. Even the field hands were brought in from the olive groves. 8 people in total, too few for an estate this size, but loyal in their service to Livia. The villa faces increased threats, he explained, his tone that of a military commander addressing troops. Each of you must become part of its defense. He assigned specific responsibilities. Helena would ensure all entrances were secured at night. Quintus, despite his age, would patrol the western perimeter with the garden hoe he'd modified into a serviceable weapon. 2 house slaves were tasked with checking window shutters and door bars each evening. The field hands would report any strangers near the property. Young Marcus received special attention. You have the sharpest eyes and know the grounds better than anyone, Titus told him. Watch from the rooftop terrace. If you see anything suspicious, use this. He handed the boy a small bronze dagger, simple but functional, its blade sharp and handle wrapped in leather for better grip. I won't fail you, Marcus promised, eyes bright with purpose as he tucked the weapon into his belt. That evening, Titus inspected the villa room by room, securing entrances and identifying vulnerabilities. In the kitchen, he found Livia reviewing court documents while Helena prepared the evening meal. Everything is arranged for tomorrow, Livia informed him. We depart at dawn to reach the praetor's court by mid-morning. After the household settled for the night, Titus continued his vigilance, moving silently through shadowed corridors and open courtyards. Near midnight, he returned to his quarters for a brief rest, leaving his door ajar to hear any disturbance. The small bronze statuette of his mother's goddess watched from its place beside his pallet, its worn features barely visible in the dim light. Titus rarely prayed, but tonight he placed his hand briefly on the figurine's head, an unconscious gesture seeking protection not for himself, but for the villa and its mistress. Sleep came lightly, years in the arena having taught him to rest while maintaining awareness. Just before dawn, a soft sound pulled him instantly alert, a pebble striking stone, followed by muffled footsteps on the garden path. Titus rose silently, retrieving the gladius he kept hidden beneath his pallet. Though he had sworn never to fight in the arena again, he had not abandoned the weapon that had kept him alive for a decade. The short sword felt familiar in his grip as he moved toward the door. A second sound, breaking pottery, came from the direction of the kitchen. Too loud for someone attempting stealth. A diversion? He considered the villa's layout, the positioning of guards. If he responded to the kitchen, the eastern wing, including Livia's quarters, would be vulnerable. Intruders! Marcus's young voice cut through the night from the rooftop. The boy had spotted the danger as trained. Titus made his decision. Quintus! The kitchen! He called, already moving toward the eastern corridor. 3 shadowed figures were visible in the moonlight, moving along the columned walkway toward Livia's chambers. They wore dark tunics, faces obscured by cloth wrappings. The lead figure carried a curved knife, a Sicarius, a professional assassin's weapon. No time for subtlety. Titus charged, his gladius catching moonlight as he closed the distance. The assassins turned, clearly surprised by the speed of response. The leader barked a command in Latin, "Take him!" while the second man drew a short sword. The third moved toward Livia's door. Titus engaged the first 2, his arena training evident in each economy of movement. He blocked the leader's knife thrust, pivoted, and struck the second man with his shoulder, driving him into a column. The impact produced a satisfying crack of bone against stone. The leader was skilled, his knife work precise and deadly. A professional, not a common thug. Titus recognized the fighting style, military training supplemented with street tactics. "Who sent you?" Titus demanded, parrying another strike. The man didn't answer, pressing his attack instead. A mistake. Titus feinted, drawing the expected response, then countered with the hilt of his gladius to the assassin's temple. The man staggered, providing the opening Titus needed. A swift strike to the knee brought the attacker down. But the third man had reached Livia's door. Titus lunged forward, only to see the assassin collapse, a familiar bronze dagger protruding from his shoulder. Behind him stood Livia, a second knife in her hand, her expression coldly determined. "You taught me well," she said as Titus reached her side. The household had awakened now. Helena appeared with a lamp, her gasp at the scene quickly controlled. Quintus arrived from the kitchen, reporting another intruder subdued there. "Bind them," Titus ordered. "We'll question them before delivering them to the magistrate." But as the household moved to secure the attackers, the leader produced a small vial from his belt. Before Titus could intervene, the man bit down on the glass, swallowed, and began convulsing. "Poison," Titus said grimly. "He chooses death over revealing his employer." "Though we know who sent them," Livia observed, her voice steady despite the night's violence. As they watched the assassin die, Titus realized how narrowly they had escaped. Nero was no longer content with legal harassment or property pressure. He had escalated to murder. "The court appearance is now secondary," Titus said quietly. "We need to move the evidence immediately. Tonight's attack won't be the last." The morning after the attack, Livia and Titus departed for the praetor's court as planned. Despite the night's violence, Livia had insisted they maintain appearances. "Nero will know his assassins failed," she'd reasoned. "If we fail to appear in court, he'll realize we've been warned and may accelerate his plans." Titus rode beside her carriage, alert for ambush along the coastal road. They had delivered the surviving attackers to the local magistrate at first light, though Titus harbored no illusions about justice. Men like Nero could easily influence local officials to dismiss such incidents as common robbery attempts. The town's forum buzzed with activity as they arrived. Merchants, citizens, and slaves moved about their business, while advocates in formal togas gathered near the basilica where the praetor would hear cases. Titus noted several men watching their arrival with too much interest, Nero's informants. Likely. "Remember," Livia said quietly as she descended from the carriage. "You are Titus Alexandros, my Greek secretary, educated in Athens. Speak only when addressed directly." The disguise was simple but effective. Titus had exchanged his usual tunic for one of finer quality, added a stylus and wax tablets to his belt, and adopted the slightly deferential posture of an educated servant. His gladiatorial scars remained visible, but many Greeks bore similar marks from warfare or pirate attacks. Inside the basilica, the praetor, a middle-aged man named Gaius Hostilius, presided from a raised seat. Livia was directed to the respondent's position, while the plaintiff, Decius Valens, stood opposite. Valens owned the neighboring estate and had a reputation for aggressive expansion. "The matter before this court," the praetor began, "concerns property boundaries between the estates of Decius Valens and Livia Marcella, widow of Marcus Cornelius. Valens claims encroachment following recent renovations." Valens's advocate stepped forward, a thin man with calculating eyes. "My client's surveyors have documented clear evidence that boundary markers were moved during repair work on the Marcella villa's eastern wall. We demand restoration of the original boundary and compensation for lost olive production." The advocate presented documents bearing official-looking seals. Titus, maintaining his role as secretary, accepted them for Livia's review. "The seals are genuine," he murmured in Greek, loud enough for others to hear his accent. Then, much quieter, "But the documents themselves appear recent. The parchment hasn't aged appropriately." Livia nodded slightly, then addressed the court. "Praetor Hostilius, I thank the court for hearing this matter. However, I must respectfully challenge the claim. The boundaries have remained unchanged since my husband's grandfather purchased the property 70 years ago." A murmur ran through the spectators. Women rarely spoke for themselves in Roman courts, typically relying on male relatives or advocates. Livia's direct address marked her as unusual. "You have evidence to support this assertion?" the praetor asked, his tone neutral but his expression intrigued. "I do." Livia gestured, and Titus provided another set of documents. The original land grant and subsequent survey records, confirmed by 3 successive praetors. The boundary markers are certified by stonecutters' marks dating to the Republic's 5th century. The praetor examined the documents carefully. These appear in order. However, Valens's survey shows discrepancies. "Because his survey is based on markers placed last month, not 70 years ago," Livia replied calmly. Gasps and whispers filled the basilica. Livia had effectively accused Valens of fraud, a serious charge against a prominent citizen. Valens's advocate sputtered indignantly. "This is outrageous. The widow impugns my client's honor without evidence." "I have evidence." Livia produced another document. Testimony from the stonecutter Titus Frontinus, who was approached by unknown persons to create false boundary markers bearing artificially aged inscriptions. He declined the commission but recognized his work when viewing the markers currently in place. The praetor's expression grew stern. "Serious allegations, Lady Marcella, which I do not make lightly, Praetor Hostilius." Her voice remained steady. "I suggest the court appoint an independent surveyor to examine the markers themselves. The true age of the stone and inscriptions will be evident to an expert." Valens himself now stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, or perhaps fear. "This is a delaying tactic. The widow knows she cannot maintain her property without male guidance. My offer to purchase the estate was generous given its deteriorating condition." "Ah," Livia replied, her tone deceptively gentle. "So this boundary dispute is connected to your desire to purchase my villa? A curious coincidence." The praetor raised his hand for silence. "The court will appoint an independent surveyor as Lady Marcella suggests. Until their report is complete, the current boundaries stand. This matter is continued until the Ides of May." As they departed the basilica, Titus maintained his secretary's demeanor while scanning the crowd. "The advocate is speaking with someone I recognize from the Senate offices in Rome," he murmured. "Nero's agent, I suspect." Livia nodded slightly. "We've won a delay, not a victory, and made ourselves more dangerous to Nero in the process." "You performed admirably," Titus observed. "Few men could have presented such a case so effectively, let alone a woman." "My husband believed Roman law should protect all citizens equally," she replied, a hint of sadness in her voice. "A radical notion, but one I've come to share." As they reached their carriage, a patrician approached, older, distinguished, with the confident bearing of senatorial rank. "Lady Marcella." He greeted her with a respectful nod. "An impressive presentation. Your husband would be proud." Livia's surprise was momentary but genuine. "Senator Schiva, I didn't realize you were in the coastal region." "Senate business," he replied vaguely. "Though I confess, when I heard of your court appearance, I made a point to observe. Marcus always spoke highly of your intelligence. Now I understand why." His gaze shifted to Titus, assessment in his eyes. "And your secretary? An unusual choice." "Titus Alexandros has proven invaluable," Livia replied smoothly. "His knowledge of law and languages serves me well." Schiva's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Indeed, perhaps we might speak privately sometime, Lady Marcella. I was your husband's friend and would be honored to offer counsel if needed." As the senator departed, Titus and Livia exchanged glances. Marcus Aurelius Schiva, the very senator her husband had approached with suspicions about Nero. "A potential ally," Livia murmured. "Or another threat." "Both, most likely," Titus replied as he helped her into the carriage. "In Rome, those categories rarely exclude each other." The praetor called a brief recess after hearing 3 minor cases following Livia's. Titus used the opportunity to observe the basilica's occupants while maintaining his scholarly disguise. He noted how Valens's advocate huddled with a well-dressed man whose senatorial stripe on his toga marked him as Nero's representative. When proceedings resumed, Praetor Hostilius surprised the court by returning to Livia's case. Upon review of the documents, the praetor announced, "This court finds additional matters requiring clarification. Lady Marcella, approach." Livia moved forward, her posture straight and dignified despite the whispering that followed her. Titus accompanied her, wax tablets ready as befitted his secretary role. "These property records reference additional lands not included in the current dispute," Hostilius stated. "Specifically, access rights to the harbor cove adjacent to your estate." Livia's brief glance at Titus conveyed her surprise. The harbor rights hadn't been mentioned in the initial complaint. "The cove has been part of the Cornelian estate since its establishment," she confirmed. "Though it is small, suitable only for fishing boats and minor trade vessels." Valens's advocate interjected, "Which makes its exclusion from your tax declarations particularly noteworthy." The accusation hung in the air: tax evasion, a serious charge that could result in property forfeiture. Livia remained composed, though Titus noticed her fingers tighten around her stylus. "The harbor cove has always been included in estate taxes, as evidenced by treasury receipts." She nodded to Titus, who produced the relevant documents from their case materials. "These are the tax receipts for the past 5 years," she continued. "Each specifically notes the harbor facilities." The praetor examined the documents with a furrowed brow. "These appear in order, yet Advocate Petronius presents treasury records indicating no such payments." "Perhaps," came a new voice from the spectator area. "The discrepancy lies not with Lady Marcella's records, but with those provided by the advocate." Senator Schiva stepped forward, his senatorial toga commanding immediate respect. "Praetor Hostilius, the Senate Finance Committee has recently discovered irregularities in coastal property tax records. Several landowners have paid taxes that mysteriously vanish before reaching official treasury ledgers." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Valens's face had drained of color. "And you can verify this?" the praetor asked. "I can." Schiva produced a sealed document. "As committee chair, I've been authorized to investigate these discrepancies. Lady Marcella's estate appears to be among those affected. Titus watched the proceedings with carefully concealed amazement. Skiva's intervention couldn't have been better timed if they had planned it themselves. The praetor read the Senate document, his expression growing increasingly grave. This is most disturbing. Advocate Petronius, your evidence appears compromised by these revelations. I object, Petronius sputtered. Senator Skiva has no standing in this local matter. The Senate's authority supersedes local jurisdictions in matters of treasury fraud. Skiva interrupted smoothly. Unless you wish to challenge senatorial prerogative? Few things frightened Roman officials more than senatorial scrutiny. Petronius fell silent, while Valens looked as though he might be ill. This court will adjourn to consider these new developments, the praetor declared. Both parties will be notified when proceedings resume. As the court dispersed, Skiva approached Livia directly. A fortunate intervention, wouldn't you say, Lady Marcella? Perhaps we might discuss this further. My villa is nearby. Would you honor me with your presence for the afternoon meal? Titus maintained his secretary's demeanor while assessing the senator. Skiva's timely appearance and knowledge of the tax discrepancies suggested either genuine assistance or a more complex agenda. You're most kind, Senator, Livia replied. However, after this morning's excitement, I must return to my estate. Perhaps another day. Of course. If Skiva was disappointed, he concealed it well. But we should speak privately soon. I knew your husband well, and there are matters he would have wanted me to discuss with you. His emphasis on privately didn't escape Titus's notice. The senator's gaze flickered briefly to him, then back to Livia. I'll send word when I'm next in the area, Skiva continued. In the meantime, be cautious, Lady Marcella. Today's legal challenge may be the least of your concerns. After the senator departed, they made their way to the carriage in silence. Only when they were away from the town did Livia speak. An unexpected ally, she mused, or someone with his own agenda regarding Nero? Both, I suspect, Titus replied, abandoning his secretary's persona now they were alone. His knowledge of the tax discrepancies is too specific to be coincidental. He was one of the senators my husband approached about Nero's corruption, Livia confirmed. The documents in the vault include correspondence between them, which means Skiva knows, or at least suspects, that evidence exists. Livia nodded, absently touching the seal ring beneath her stola. The question is whether he truly opposes Nero or merely wishes to acquire the evidence for his own political advantage. Roman politics, Titus observed dryly, where today's ally is tomorrow's adversary, and sometimes both simultaneously. Livia's smile held little humor. We should review the correspondence between Skiva and Marcus tonight. Perhaps it contains clues to his true position. As their carriage crested the coastal hill, the villa came into view below, white stone gleaming in the afternoon sun. The sight normally brought Livia comfort, but today her expression remained troubled. Nero won't stop, she said quietly. Today's legal maneuver failed, but he has other avenues. The attack last night proves how far he's willing to go. Titus followed her gaze to the villa. What had begun as a simple employment arrangement had evolved into something far more complex. He was no longer merely protecting a property and its owner, but standing against corruption that reached the highest levels of Roman power. We'll be ready, he assured her, the simple words carrying the weight of a gladiator's oath. A promise not of victory, but of unwavering commitment to the fight ahead. 3 days after the court appearance, a messenger arrived at Villa Marcella bearing an invitation. Senator Skiva requested Livia's presence at his coastal estate that evening to discuss matters of mutual concern regarding certain influential parties. The phrasing was deliberately vague, yet the implication was clear. It could be a trap, Titus warned as they discussed the invitation in Livia's study. Or a genuine offer of alliance, she countered. Skiva was my husband's friend and has already demonstrated support in court, which makes him either trustworthy or dangerously clever. After considerable debate, they decided to accept the invitation with precautions. Titus would accompany Livia as her secretary, armed discreetly beneath his fine tunic. Young Marcus would follow at a distance, prepared to ride for help if they didn't return by an appointed hour. Sciva's villa proved even more impressive than Livia's, its colonnaded entrance flanked by marble statues imported from Greece. Servants led them through a peristyle garden where fountains played among exotic flowering plants. The senator received them in a private dining room rather than the formal triclinium, suggesting a conversation of discretion rather than social pleasantries. He reclined alone on a couch, dismissing his servants after wine was poured. "Lady Marcella," he greeted Livia with genuine warmth. "I'm pleased you accepted my invitation." His gaze shifted to Titus. "And your secretary joins us again. How convenient." The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on either of them. "Titus Alexandros has my complete confidence," Livia replied smoothly. "Anything said in his presence may be considered secure." "Indeed." Sciva sipped his wine, studying Titus over the rim of his cup. "Though I wonder if Alexandros is truly the name he prefers. I suspect Varro feels more natural after all these years." The room fell silent. Titus kept his expression neutral, though his hand instinctively moved toward the dagger concealed beneath his tunic. "You seem well informed, Senator," Livia said carefully. "Information is currency in Rome." Sciva set down his wine. "For instance, I know that Titus Varro was not merely any gladiator, but a Thracian military leader captured during the Eastern campaigns. His tactical mind proved as valuable in the arena as his fighting skills." Titus remained still, assessing the senator's purpose in revealing this knowledge. "I also know," Sciva continued, "that your husband discovered evidence of corruption involving Senator Nero, evidence he intended to bring before the Senate before his untimely death." Livia's composure remained impressive. "You seem to know a great deal about my household affairs. Marcus and I spoke often before his death," Sciva explained. "He trusted me with his suspicions, though not with the evidence itself. He was cautious, wisely so." The senator rose, moving to a side table where he unrolled a map of the Italian coast. "Nero's scheme extends beyond simple corruption. He's creating a private empire along the coast, controlling shipping, evading taxes, eliminating competitors. Some believe he aspires to power that rivals the Senate itself." "Some?" Titus questioned, speaking for the first time. "A faction within the Senate," Sciva clarified. "Men who recognize Nero's ambition as dangerous to the Republic. We've been gathering our own evidence, but it's fragmentary, insufficient for formal charges. And you believe we possess what you lack," Livia concluded. "I know Marcus found something significant." Sciva's gaze was direct, unflinching. "Something that made Nero nervous enough to arrange an accident for a respected patrician. The accusation hung in the air. Nero had murdered Marcus Cornelius." "That's a serious allegation," Livia said quietly. "One I wouldn't make without certainty." Sciva returned to his couch. "Marcus contacted me 3 days before his death, saying he had compiled evidence that would end Nero's ambitions permanently. We arranged to meet, but he never arrived." Titus and Livia exchanged glances, silently debating how much to reveal. "If such evidence existed," Titus said carefully, "what would you propose doing with it?" "Bringing it before the full Senate," Sciva replied without hesitation. "Nero has supporters, but faced with irrefutable proof of corruption and possibly murder, even they would abandon him." "And those who presented such evidence?" Livia asked. "What would become of them?" "They would have the Senate's protection and gratitude." Sciva leaned forward. "Lady Marcella, I respected your husband greatly. His death left a void in Rome's conscience. Helping complete his work would honor his memory and serve the republic he loved." His words resonated with Livia's earlier statements about legacy. Titus noted the subtle manipulation, whether intentional or coincidental. "We need time to consider," Livia said finally. "Of course," Sciva nodded. "But not too much time. Nero grows increasingly concerned about loose ends." The court challenge was merely his opening move. As they prepared to depart, Sciva addressed Titus directly. A final observation, Varro. In Thrace, you commanded men against Rome and nearly prevailed through superior strategy. Now you protect a Roman widow against a Roman senator. Life takes unexpected turns, does it not? Fortunes will never stop turning, Titus replied evenly. Today's victor becomes tomorrow's vanquished. Indeed, Scaeva smiled. Which is why choosing the right allies matters more than choosing the right battles. The journey back to Villa Marcella passed in contemplative silence. Only when they were safely within Livia's study did she speak. He knows too much, she observed. About you, about Marcus, about everything. Yet he revealed his knowledge openly rather than using it against us, Titus countered. That suggests either honesty or a more subtle strategy. Can we trust him with the evidence? Titus considered the question carefully. Partially, perhaps. We could provide enough to demonstrate good faith without revealing everything. A test? Livia nodded. To determine whether he truly stands against Nero or merely seeks the evidence for his own purposes. As they discussed strategies into the night, neither noticed the small oil lamp burning in the olive grove beyond the villa, a signal that watching eyes had observed their return from Scaeva's estate. They returned to the villa after midnight to find it had been thoroughly searched in their absence. Nothing was stolen, but items had been moved, scrolls unrolled, cabinets opened. The intruders had been meticulous and professional, leaving only subtle signs that Titus's trained eye detected immediately. The vault? Livia whispered, her face pale in the lamplight. They hurried to the storeroom, finding it undisturbed. The hidden door remained concealed, its ancient mechanism intact. Inside, the treasure and documents appeared untouched. They knew what they were looking for, Titus observed, but not where to find it. Scaeva's men, Livia suggested, or Nero's. The timing is too convenient to be coincidence. They conducted a thorough inventory of the vault's contents, ensuring nothing had been disturbed. As Titus replaced a ledger on its shelf, several loose pages slipped from between its covers. Notes in Marcus's handwriting that they hadn't noticed before. Livia examined them, her brow furrowing. These are odd. Lists of names, locations, and numbers, but they don't correspond to any of the transactions we've identified. Titus studied the pages over her shoulder. The writing is deliberate but doesn't follow standard accounting patterns. Could it be a cipher? Marcus was cautious but not paranoid, Livia replied, though doubt crept into her voice. Still, with matters this sensitive, they brought the pages to Livia's study, comparing them against the transaction records they'd already decoded. Hours passed as they searched for patterns, correlations, any hint of meaning behind the cryptic notations. Near dawn, Titus noticed something. These location markings, they don't indicate actual places but page numbers in the other ledgers. Livia quickly retrieved the reference documents. You're right, and these numbers aren't sums but word positions. Working together, they began decoding the cipher, extracting hidden messages embedded within innocent-looking financial records. What emerged chilled them both. This goes far beyond Nero, Livia whispered, arranging the decoded notes in sequence. Marcus discovered a conspiracy involving at least 5 senators, including... She paused, her finger hovering over a name. Scaeva, Titus completed for her. He's part of this. The decoded documents revealed a complex web of corruption. Nero was merely the most aggressive participant in a scheme involving multiple senators who controlled coastal properties. Together, they manipulated shipping taxes, eliminated commercial rivals, and systematically acquired strategic harbors. Their ultimate goal appeared to be control of Rome's grain supply, power that could bring the city to its knees if wielded ruthlessly. My husband died for discovering this, Livia said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. And Scaeva, who claimed to be his ally, was part of the conspiracy all along, which explains his interest in the evidence. Titus nodded grimly. He doesn't want to expose Nero. He wants to ensure Marcus's evidence doesn't implicate him as well. As they contemplated this revelation, Helena knocked urgently at the study door. Domina, a messenger has arrived from the town. The villa is summoned to account for last night's events. What events? Livia asked, exchanging concerned glances with Titus. The elderly steward's expression was grave. Senator Skiva's coastal villa was attacked last night. 2 of his guards were killed. The magistrate demands your presence immediately. The accusation was clear. While Livia and Titus had been seen visiting Skiva, someone had attacked his estate, and suspicion had fallen on them. A trap, Titus said after Helena departed. Skiva arranges an attack on his own property, then accuses us to discredit any evidence we might present against him. Or Nero's men attacked Skiva, believing he might be allied with us, Livia countered. We can't be certain which scenario is true. Either way, we face immediate danger. Titus moved to the window, checking the grounds for signs of approaching officials. We need to secure the evidence before responding to this summons. Livia nodded, her decision already made. We'll divide it. Some hidden here, some elsewhere. If we're arrested, at least the complete evidence won't fall into their hands. They worked quickly, selecting the most damning documents and sealing them in waterproof leather pouches. Titus concealed one bundle beneath a loose flagstone in his quarters. Another was hidden in a hollow space behind the villa's shrine to the household gods. The third set I'll entrust to Helena, Livia decided. She can claim sanctuary at the Temple of Vesta if necessary. They won't search a consecrated priestess. As they completed these preparations, young Marcus burst into the study, his face flushed from running. Riders approaching from town. At least 6 men with the magistrate's insignia. Titus moved to the window, confirming the boy's report. They'll be here within minutes. One last task, Livia said, retrieving a blank scroll. Quickly, she wrote a message, sealed it with her husband's ring, and handed it to Marcus. Take this to Senator Quintus Fabius Maximus in Rome. He was my father's oldest friend and has no connection to coastal properties. Travel the inland road to avoid interception. The boy's eyes widened at the responsibility, but he nodded firmly, clutching the scroll. I won't fail you, Domina. Go now. Through the old tunnel beneath the east garden, Titus instructed. It emerges near the cypress grove. From there, take the hill path until you reach the main road. As Marcus slipped away, Livia straightened her stola and composed her expression. Now we face the magistrate and whatever charges they've manufactured. We admit nothing, Titus advised. Whatever evidence they claim to have, we demand to see it directly. And if they arrest us, then we've ensured the evidence survives. Even if we don't. Livia's hand found his briefly, a gesture of solidarity that transcended their stations. For Marcus's memory, she said quietly, and for Rome itself. Together, they walked to the atrium to meet the approaching officials, their faces revealing nothing of the knowledge they now possessed, that they faced not just one corrupt senator, but a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Roman power. The magistrate's questioning lasted hours, conducted in Livia's atrium with an audience of armed guards. Both Livia and Titus maintained their innocence, providing a detailed account of their visit to Skiva and their direct return to the villa afterward. Witnesses place you at Senator Skiva's estate until late evening, the magistrate noted, a thin man named Cassius with the pinched expression of someone executing unpleasant orders. The attack occurred after your departure, which means we couldn't have been involved, Livia pointed out reasonably, unless you arranged for others to carry out the attack while you established your alibi. The magistrate's tone suggested he'd already reached his conclusion regardless of their answers. To their surprise, however, he didn't arrest them. After the interrogation, he merely issued a formal restriction. Neither Livia nor any member of her household could leave the coastal region without permission until the investigation concluded. House arrest without the dignity of calling it such, Livia observed after the officials departed. They're watching to see what we do next, hoping we'll lead them to the evidence, Titus agreed, or flee and confirm our supposed guilt. That evening, they returned to the hidden chamber to review what they'd learned. Titus examined the vault more thoroughly, searching for additional secrets the ancient room might hold. These walls are older than Rome itself, he noted, running his hand along the fitted stones. Built to last centuries. His methodical inspection revealed something unexpected. a subtle difference in the sound when he tapped certain sections of the back wall. Further investigation exposed another hidden mechanism, similar to but distinct from the main doors. Another chamber? Livia wondered as Titus worked the ancient lock. The answer came as a section of wall swung inward, revealing not a room but a narrow passageway cut through the bedrock beneath the villa. Cool, damp air rushed past them, carrying the distant scent of salt water. An escape tunnel, Titus realized, leading toward the sea, judging by the air. They followed the passage cautiously, Titus leading with a torch. The tunnel descended gradually, its walls showing tool marks from ancient construction. After several hundred paces, they reached a junction, one path continuing downward, another rising toward the surface. We should see where they lead, Livia decided. The descending path emerged in a small cove invisible from the sea, accessible only by small boat or the tunnel itself. The ascending path rose to a concealed exit among rocks at the edge of the villa's grounds, nearly a quarter-mile from the main buildings. Whoever built this planned for siege or escape, Titus observed as they returned to the vault. Perhaps both. The Etruscans who first settled here, Livia suggested. My husband's grandfather mentioned ancient ruins beneath the original foundation. This discovery transformed their strategic thinking. With Marcus on his way to Rome with copies of the evidence, and the tunnel providing an escape route if needed, they could afford to take a more aggressive stance. We should prepare packets of evidence for distribution, Livia proposed. If Nero or Scaeva moves against us directly, we can ensure the documents reach multiple senators simultaneously. Titus nodded agreement. And we should ready the villa for defense, though subtly. Training the household, securing weapons, establishing signals. They worked through the night, organizing the most damning evidence into separate packets, each containing enough information to implicate the conspirators but not so much that the loss of any single packet would be catastrophic. By dawn, exhaustion clouded their thinking. As they secured the chamber and prepared to seek brief rest, Livia paused in the dim light of the storeroom. What if we're approaching this wrongly? She asked suddenly. Playing their game on their terms? Titus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you suggest instead? The conspirators expect us to be defensive, hiding evidence, seeking allies, preparing for their next move. Her eyes reflected the torch's flame, determination burning equally bright. What if we attack instead? How? By inviting them here. Her voice strengthened with conviction. Send word to Scaeva that we wish to discuss terms, that we have evidence but are willing to negotiate. Suggest that Senator Nero might also attend to resolve all matters directly. Titus considered the audacity of the plan. Bring our enemies to us, on ground we've prepared? Precisely. Livia's smile held no warmth. They believe I'm a vulnerable widow and you're merely hired protection. Let them continue thinking that until it's too late. The strategy was bold, risky, but offered advantages their defensive posture lacked. Control of the battlefield, the element of surprise, and most importantly, the opportunity to confront their enemies directly rather than waiting for the next attack. If they come, they'll bring force, Titus warned. Guards, perhaps assassins disguised as servants. I'm counting on it, Livia replied. We'll be prepared for whatever escort they bring. And while they're here, Marcus will be reaching Rome with evidence that will ensure our survival, or our vindication if we fall. As dawn's light filtered through the villa's windows, they finalized their plan. Livia would draft a carefully worded invitation to Scaeva, hinting at willingness to surrender the evidence in exchange for guarantees of safety. Titus would prepare the villa's defenses, training the household while establishing escape routes and hiding places for the evidence packets. Rest first, Titus insisted, noting the shadows beneath Livia's eyes. We can't afford mistakes from exhaustion. A few hours only, she agreed reluctantly. We have much to accomplish before our guests arrive. As they parted in the atrium, she toured her chambers, he toured his quarters. Livia hesitated, then turned back. Varro, she said quietly. When this began, I sought merely to protect my property. Now we stand against corruption that threatens Rome itself. I never intended to draw you into such danger. I chose this path, he reminded her, as you chose to continue your husband's work rather than surrender to threats. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of how their initially transactional relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated: partnership, trust, and perhaps emotions too complex to name amid the crisis they faced. Until midday, then, she said finally, her voice steadier. Then we prepare for war. 3 days passed before a response to Livia's carefully crafted invitation arrived. During that time, Titus transformed the villa into a subtle fortress. He trained the household staff in emergency protocols, established defensive positions, and prepared escape routes. Every member of the household was assigned specific responsibilities, from Helena's management of critical documents to old Quintus's surprising knowledge of defensive traps from his military days. Titus spent hours with parchment and charcoal, creating detailed maps of the villa grounds. He marked sightlines, potential ambush points, and defensive positions, drawing on military strategy long and used since his capture. As he worked, memories of commanding men in battle against Rome surfaced, skills he had buried beneath years of arena combat. The message, when it came, was brief and unmistakable in its arrogance. Senator Cassius Nero himself would arrive the following day to resolve all outstanding matters regarding the Cornelian estate. No mention was made of evidence or negotiations, as though the senator were merely performing an administrative duty. He comes himself rather than sending representatives, Livia observed as they discussed the response in her study. Either he believes we pose no threat, or he wants to confirm personally what evidence exists. Or both, Titus suggested. Arrogance and caution often coexist in powerful men. The message made no mention of Skiva, a conspicuous omission that heightened their suspicion of coordination between the supposedly rival senators. That afternoon, a dust cloud on the coastal road signaled unexpected visitors. Through careful observation from the villa's highest point, Titus identified Skiva's personal guard accompanying their master's litter. Arriving a day early, Titus noted grimly. Without invitation or announcement, they received the senator in the atrium, maintaining the pretense of cordial relations despite the knowledge of his betrayal. Skiva's explanation for his unannounced visit seemed plausible on the surface. I heard Nero plans to meet with you, he said, accepting wine from Helena. Given recent events, I felt obligated to warn you. The man is not to be trusted. Unlike yourself, of course, Livia replied, her tone perfectly balanced between politeness and ambiguity. If Skiva detected the subtle barb, he showed no sign. I've come to offer protection. My men can supplement your household guard during Nero's visit. The offer confirmed their suspicions. Skiva wanted his own forces in place before Nero arrived, not to protect Livia, but to ensure his access to the evidence and perhaps eliminate his conspiracy partner if the opportunity arose. How thoughtful, Livia responded with practiced grace. Though I fear we lack suitable quarters for additional men. They can camp within your walls, Skiva pressed. A small inconvenience for the security they provide. Titus intervened with the smooth deference of his secretary persona. Perhaps the men might establish their presence on the western grounds, Senator? That area offers good visibility of the approach road while keeping them separate from the household. The suggestion appeared helpful while actually placing Skiva's men exactly where Titus wanted them, isolated from both the main villa and the hidden exits they had prepared. Skiva accepted the arrangement, seemingly satisfied with having his forces on the property. As the senator supervised his men's encampment, Titus and Livia withdrew to finalize their preparations. He shows his hand too clearly, Livia observed, arriving before Nero, positioning his men on our grounds. His eagerness works to our advantage, Titus replied. With his forces deployed where we suggested, we control their movements more effectively. That evening, Helena reported unusual activity in the olive groves beyond the villa walls. Moving shadows, muffled voices, the occasional glint of metal in moonlight. Nero's advance scouts, Titus concluded after investigating personally, preparing for tomorrow's arrival. Dawn revealed the extent of their situation. Beyond the villa's eastern boundary, a small encampment had appeared overnight. Though they flew no identifying standards, the disciplined arrangement of tents and the quality of the visible equipment marked them as Nero's men rather than common travelers. By midday, dust on the approach road signaled the senator's official arrival. The procession was impressive. 8 mounted guards, a luxurious covered litter, and several wagons carrying supplies and additional personnel. A delegation more suited to a diplomatic mission than a simple meeting, Livia noted as they watched from her study window. Or a military occupation, Titus added grimly. Nero's entrance to the villa was calculated for maximum effect. The senator, a man in his 50s with the hard physique of someone who maintained military discipline despite his political position, strode into the atrium flanked by 4 guards in polished armor. His expression combined condescension with the practiced charm that had helped him rise through Rome's political ranks. Lady Marcella, he greeted Livia with a respectful nod that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Your home is as lovely as rumors suggested. Senator Nero, Livia replied with equal formality. This is an unexpected honor. I thought it time we discussed your situation directly. His gaze swept the atrium, noting exits, assessing the space with military precision before settling on Titus. And this is your secretary? The one who accompanied you to court. Titus Alexandros, Livia confirmed, maintaining their cover. Greek-educated and invaluable to my household. Nero's smile was cold. Indeed, though some might say a widow with such an unusual companion invites speculation. The implied impropriety hung in the air, the first of many subtle attacks Nero would likely deploy before revealing his true purpose. Perhaps we might discuss the actual reason for your visit? Senator, Livia suggested, refusing to be baited. I believe you mentioned resolving matters regarding my estate? Of course. Nero's tone shifted to one of false concern. I've come with a generous offer that would relieve you of the burdens this property clearly presents. 3 times its market value, immediate payment, and arrangements for suitable accommodations in Rome befitting your status. How extraordinarily generous, Livia replied. Particularly for property you previously claimed held little value. A flash of irritation crossed Nero's features before his political mask returned. I recognize the sentimental importance it must hold for you. My offer reflects that understanding. And if I decline, then matters become more complicated. The pretense of benevolence faded slightly. Legal complications have a way of multiplying for isolated estates with questionable management. The threat was unmistakable. Before Livia could respond, a commotion at the atrium entrance announced another arrival. Skiva, entering with the confident air of someone joining an expected gathering. Nero, he exclaimed with obviously feigned surprise. I had no idea you would be visiting Lady Marcella today. The 2 senators regarded each other with the careful neutrality of predators assessing whether to fight or coordinate their hunt. In that moment, watching their calculated performance, Titus and Livia exchanged a glance of silent confirmation. Their enemies had arrived. The final confrontation was about to begin. Dinner that evening was a masterpiece of political theater. Livia hosted both senators in the formal triclinium, where conversation flowed with practiced civility, while undercurrents of tension electrified the air. Servants moved efficiently under Helena's watchful direction, their expressions revealing nothing of the preparations concealed throughout the villa. Your estate manages impressive hospitality despite its limitations, Nero observed, sampling the wine with a connoisseur's deliberation. The Cornelian family has always valued quality over ostentation, Livia replied smoothly. Though I'm certain it cannot compare to your estates in Rome. Skiva inserted himself into the exchange with practiced ease. I've always found coastal properties have a charm that city dwellings cannot match. The sea air, the privacy, the strategic advantages. The last phrase hung between them, its meaning clear to all present. As the meal concluded, Nero dispensed with preliminaries. Lady Marcella, I understand you possess certain documents from your husband's administration of this estate. As a gesture of goodwill, I suggest you share them with us this evening. To what documents do you refer, Senator? Livia's expression remained politely puzzled. Financial records, correspondence, perhaps items of a more sensitive nature. Nero's smile thinned. Your husband was known to be meticulous in his record-keeping, as any responsible patrician would be, Sciva added, watching both carefully. Livia dabbed her lips with a linen napkin before responding. My husband's records are extensive. Perhaps you could be more specific about your interests. I think we've exhausted the need for these games, Nero said, his tone hardening. Your husband discovered information he shouldn't have. Before his unfortunate accident, he hid that information somewhere in this villa. I want it. As does the Senate, Sciva interjected, maintaining his pretense of official interest. For the public good, of course. Livia set down her wine cup with deliberate calm. Gentlemen, it grows late. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow when... Now. Nero's fist struck the table, rattling silver cups. The documents. All of them. Titus, who had remained standing near the entrance in his role as secretary, shifted his weight slightly. A subtle signal to Helena, who nodded almost imperceptibly before exiting toward the kitchen. Senator Nero, Livia said, her voice steady despite the naked threat. I believe you misunderstand my position. I am not some provincial widow to be intimidated in her own home. Your position is precisely what's at stake, Nero replied coldly. Cooperate and you leave this estate wealthy and protected. Resist and you leave with nothing, if you leave at all. Outside, a sudden commotion broke the tension. Shouts, the clash of metal, running footsteps. One of Nero's guards burst into the triclinium. Senator, we're under attack. The western perimeter. Nero rose immediately, hand moving to the dagger at his belt. Marcella's trap, he snarled. Not hers, Sciva countered, also standing. This is your doing, Nero. The accusation confirmed what they had suspected. Neither senator trusted the other, each having planned to eliminate his co-conspirator once the evidence was secured. Secure the villa, Nero ordered his guard. No one leaves until I have those documents. The chaos outside escalated rapidly. Through the window, orange light reflected against clouds. Fires had been set somewhere on the grounds. The carefully orchestrated trap was springing, though not exactly as planned. Sciva and Nero had triggered their betrayals simultaneously, their forces now fighting each other while also searching for the evidence. Lady Marcella should be moved to safety, Titus suggested, maintaining his secretary's demeanor despite the urge to draw the gladius concealed beneath his tunic. She stays where I can see her, Nero countered, drawing his dagger fully now. As do you, secretary. Or should I call you by your arena name? The Thracian, wasn't it? So his true identity was known. Titus abandoned the pretense, straightening to his full height and dropping the deferential posture he'd maintained for weeks. If you knew who I am, he said quietly, you should have brought more men. The fighting outside intensified. Smoke began filtering through the windows as more structures caught fire. Nero's guard returned with reinforcements, for armed men who secured the triclinium exits. Bring the widow, Nero commanded. We're moving to the study. That's where the documents would be kept. As they moved through the villa's corridors, the extent of the chaos became clear. Sciva's men had turned against Nero's forces as planned, but something had gone wrong. Both groups were now fighting the villa's defenders and each other in a three-way conflict that spread across the grounds. In the atrium, they encountered Sciva himself, accompanied by 2 guards. Nero, did you think I wouldn't recognize your betrayal? He called, his composure cracking to reveal genuine anger. Save your indignation, Nero replied coolly. We both came for the same purpose. I simply decided to eliminate an unnecessary partner. The documents are secured elsewhere, Livia interrupted, her calm voice cutting through their confrontation. Neither of you will find them by ransacking my home or threatening me. Both senators turned to her with nearly identical expressions of calculation. The vault, Nero said suddenly. The old storage room that collapsed. That's where Marcus hid everything. Titus tensed, ready to move. How had Nero learned about the vault? The answer came as Livia's brother-in-law, Publius, stepped from the shadows of a nearby corridor. I told him, Publius admitted, avoiding Livia's gaze. After Marcus died, I suspected something was hidden there, but could never find the entrance mechanism. You betrayed your own family, Livia said, her voice barely above a whisper. My debts left no choice, Publius replied, shame mingling with defiance. Nero promised to clear them in exchange for information. The revelation had barely registered when a new commotion erupted at the villa's main entrance. Armored men poured through the doors, not Nero's or Scaeva's forces, but soldiers bearing the insignia of the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite military unit that answered directly to the Senate. What is this? Nero demanded, genuine confusion breaking through his controlled facade. The answer came in the form of a centurion who strode into the atrium, scroll in hand. Senator Cassius Nero, Senator Marcus Aurelius Scaeva, by authority of the Senate and people of Rome, you are ordered to surrender your weapons and accompany us to the forum to answer charges of corruption, conspiracy, and treason against the Republic. Nero's shock quickly transformed to calculation. He grabbed Livia, pressing his dagger to her throat. Stand back. I'll kill her. That would only add murder to your charges, the centurion replied impassively. Titus, seeing Nero's attention fixed on the guards, made his move. With the speed and precision that had kept him alive for a decade in the arena, he struck the senator's wrist with the edge of his hand. The dagger clattered to the marble floor as Nero howled in pain and surprise. In the momentary confusion, Livia twisted away using the escape technique Titus had taught her in the garden. She moved swiftly behind the Praetorian guards while Titus subdued Nero with an efficient strike that drove the corrupt senator to his knees. Scaeva, seeing his co-conspirator captured, attempted to maintain his facade of innocence. I am here at the request of Lady Marcella, he protested as guards surrounded him. These charges are clearly a mistake. The Senate has reviewed evidence that suggests otherwise, the centurion replied, producing a familiar leather document case, one of the packets Marcus had carried to Rome. Testimony from multiple sources confirms your involvement in the coastal conspiracy. As the guards secured both senators, Titus moved to Livia's side. Marcus succeeded, he said quietly. It appears so, she agreed, watching as her former tormentors were led away in chains. Though I never expected the Praetorian Guard as our salvation. The centurion approached them, offering a formal bow to Livia. Lady Marcella, the Senate extends its gratitude for your service to the Republic. Senator Quintus Fabius received your evidence and acted immediately to secure these arrests. My husband would be pleased to see justice done, she replied with dignity, though Titus could see the emotion she carefully controlled. As the Praetorians began extinguishing fires and securing the villa, the centurion added, the young messenger who brought your evidence showed remarkable courage. He reached Rome despite attempts to intercept him. Marcus is safe, then? Titus asked, genuine concern breaking through his usual reserve. Safe and honored for his service, the centurion confirmed. The Senate has granted him citizenship in recognition of his actions. The news brought the first genuine smile to Livia's face since the ordeal began. As dawn broke over the villa's smoking ruins, she surveyed the damage with clear-eyed assessment. We rebuild, she said simply. Beginning today. Titus nodded, suddenly aware of a sharp pain in his side. Looking down, he discovered a spreading crimson stain on his tunic. A wound received during the chaos, unnoticed in the heat of confrontation. Varro! Livia's alarm cut through the morning air as he staggered slightly. A minor injury. He attempted to reassure her, though the room had begun to spin alarmingly. The last thing he remembered was Livia calling for a physician. Her face above his as darkness closed in from all sides. 2 months passed before Titus regained his full strength. What he had dismissed as a minor injury had proven nearly fatal. A dagger thrust that pierced his lung during the chaos of the night attack. Only the skilled hands of a physician from the Praetorian Guard's medical corps had saved his life. Throughout his recovery, Livia had remained a constant presence, often reading to him from philosophical texts or updating him on the villa's reconstruction. The east wing, severely damaged by fire, was being rebuilt with stronger walls and larger windows overlooking the sea. The gardens, trampled during the fighting, sprouted new growth under Quintus's careful tending. On a clear summer morning, Titus walked the grounds for the first time without pain hampering his movements. He found Livia in the rebuilt herb garden, supervising the planting of rare medicinal plants acquired from Alexandria. "The physician says you've made a remarkable recovery," she greeted him, pleasure evident in her smile. "Though you're still forbidden from lifting anything heavier than a wine cup. Gladiators make poor patients," he acknowledged, joining her on the stone bench where they had shared their first personal conversation months earlier. "We're accustomed to fighting through pain, not resting to heal it. Well, this particular gladiator will follow orders if he wishes to remain in my employment." Her tone was light, but something in her expression suggested deeper thoughts beneath the casual words. Reports from Rome had arrived regularly during his convalescence. Senator Nero and 4 co-conspirators had been convicted of corruption and treason. Scaeva had escaped the most serious charges through strategic testimony against his former allies, though his political career was finished. Livia's brother-in-law Publius had been exiled to Gaul, his debts to Nero cancelled by the senator's conviction and property confiscation. "Marcus returned last week," Livia mentioned, adjusting her stola against the sea breeze. "The Senate granted him a small stipend for his education. He speaks of nothing but studying law now. A more worthy ambition than following gladiators," Titus observed with a hint of a smile. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken thoughts. The crisis that had brought them together had passed. The question of what would follow hung in the air as tangibly as the scent of herbs surrounding them. "The Senate has formally recognized my independent status," Livia said finally. "In recognition of service to the Republic, I've been granted special dispensation to manage the estate without male guardianship. The first such ruling in a generation." "You've earned it," Titus replied sincerely. "Few women or men would have shown such courage against powerful enemies. The Senate also inquired about you." Her eyes met his directly. "Your actions have been noted at the highest levels. There is talk of potential citizenship in recognition of your service." The notion was extraordinary. A former gladiator, a captured enemy of Rome, granted the rights and status of a citizen. Such things happened in legends, not reality. "And what did you tell them?" he asked carefully. "That you were recovering. That your future plans remained undecided." She paused, then added more softly, "That I hoped those plans might include remaining at Villa Marcella." The invitation in her words was clear, though propriety prevented her from stating it more directly. Roman society would never fully accept a relationship between a patrician widow and a former gladiator, regardless of special dispensations or heroic actions. "My contract of employment has been fulfilled," he noted, watching her expression. "The villa is secure, its enemies defeated. Then perhaps we need a new arrangement." Livia reached into the folds of her stola and withdrew a small scroll sealed with her husband's ring. "I've had this prepared for some time, waiting for the right moment." Titus accepted the scroll, breaking the seal carefully. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief. "This is," he began, but words failed him. "A legal adoption," she confirmed, "combined with manumission documents that would make you legally my equal under Roman law. Not as my employee or protector, but as a member of the Cornelian family with all rights and privileges thereof." The document represented something beyond mere employment or even citizenship. It offered belonging, identity, a place in the world that neither the arena nor his lost homeland had provided. "The choice is yours," Livia continued when he remained silent. "You've earned your freedom many times over. If you wish to seek your fortune elsewhere, I would understand." Titus re-rolled the scroll carefully, gathering his thoughts. "When I entered your service, I sought only employment, a means to survive. I never expected to find purpose again, much less." He hesitated, then finished simply, "Much less a home. Is that a yes?" The vulnerability in her question revealed how much his answer meant to her. "It is," he replied, his decision made. "Though Rome may never fully accept what we build here. Rome has survived for centuries by adapting to change," Livia observed, her smile returning. "As have we both." As they walked together toward the villa that had become their shared battlefield and sanctuary, Titus reflected on the strange path that had led him here. From Thracian warrior to Roman slave, from gladiator to protector, and now to something no arena victory could have provided. A future built on choice rather than survival, on equality rather than servitude. Behind them, the sea stretched endlessly toward the horizon, its constant motion mirroring the ever-changing fortunes that had brought them together. The villa stood proud against the coastal sky, its ancient walls bearing the scars of recent conflict yet standing stronger for having weathered the storm. Like its mistress, like himself, damaged, tested, but ultimately unbroken. "Helena has prepared a special meal to celebrate your recovery," Livia mentioned as they reached the atrium. "And our new beginning?" Titus suggested, offering his arm in a gesture that balanced perfectly between proper respect and personal affection. "That too," she agreed, accepting both his arm and the future it represented. "That most of all."